All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Rohan, I think I'm about to open a can of worms. I want to tackle, or at least start tackling, a kind of a big question. What the heck is specialty coffee?
That's what we're doing here today? Oh
Yeah.
my God.
Just a light conversation.
Just a light convo. Feels like you're having an existential crisis there, mate. Can you relax a little bit?
Okay. Well, maybe not an existential crisis. Look, maybe it's not a crisis at all. And it's not just me, okay? This is a question that seems to be coming up more and more regularly. And it kind of seems like it should be a simple answer, right? You know, but there's a lot tied up in it. Roasters everywhere we go, cafes that we walk into, producers all around the world, they're all using this term, this phrase, specialty coffee. And we've built our careers around it, but I think we're all talking about slightly different things.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I feel like if you were to ask everyone in the industry right now in all those different areas, like we'd all probably write down something slightly different.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of what I want to do with this episode. I want to dig in a little bit and try and tease it apart because it seems simple, but I think there's a few things tangled in there. And I want to dig into focusing on not just conversations about like what is the best coffee or discussions like is pre-batch killing espresso and specialty coffee service? Nah, well, let's not talk about that. But I want to kind of get more into the bedrock of things. What the heck were we even talking about in the first place when we said specialty coffee?
I feel like we are going to open a can of worms here, but I feel like it's important, especially now.
Yeah.
And a little caveat, we're not answering the question today. There's not going to be a one-line manifesto that we're throwing out into the ether as a small little wee podcast talking on the internet. And also, I don't think we have the right to answer it. I think there are a lot of different people and perspectives that we can dive into later to kind of get that. But we'll definitely open up the conversation and kind of unpack it a little bit.
Yeah. And the more I got into this, the more you realize that there's so many deep areas around things like consumer psychology, trade economics, all the colonial history background that's baked into kind of what we buy and sell, trend forecasting, all of that shapes this idea in this world that we're in, and none of that is our expertise. But I really want us to be having some more of these kinds of discussions here, right? Not just bemoaning like, oh, specialty coffee isn't what it used to be. It's been co-opted or diluted. Instead, I want to try and focus this on understanding where it came from and what do we really care about now? And what do we want it to be talking about?
Yeah. So let's map out what we can and let's open up that conversations. I want to have some conversations with different producers, with roasters, with different people in the chain to kind of understand their definition of what specialty coffee means for them. And also the listeners, what it means to you and whether you think we're on track or not.
We're just talking
We're just
absolute
going,
crap.
yeah.
Okay, deal. So where should we even start?
I think we should start with our names.
Oh, okay.
I'm ROHAN COOKE. I make coffee on the internet.
And I'm Ben Bicknell. I judge people who make coffee, but only in competitions.
And together we are It's Just Coffee, the podcast for people who know it's never just coffee. And also, Liam, what's your little catchphrase? If I'm Rohan, I make coffee on the internet. What are you?
I'm Liam. I make people who drink and judge coffee sound good.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, I like it.
There you go.
I like it. He's there to polish us. Please, and thank you. Today's episode is sponsored by our friends at APAX Lab.
If you listen to this podcast, you know APAX Lab mineral concentrates.
Yeah, these are the products that are used by world champions to unlock the full potential of their coffees.
But they've actually just released a new crazy product called Conflux. This is water that's been hit with ultra-low frequency electromagnetic waves.
It does sound crazy, but I actually saw some competitors use this technology at the World Barista Championships.
Look, I thought it sounded ridiculous, but till we did some tests here in the office, I could actually taste the difference. There was more body, there was more sweetness. And hey, if you're a critic or you're skeptical, I dare you to try it. See if there's a difference or not.
Yep. Visit apaxlab.com and you be the judge.
So before we get into like the why now, why we're having this conversation now, let's actually just nail down the part of the word specialty coffee. Is there a hard like technical definition that we can kind of build from? Because I feel like as we talk, we're about to dive into it, gets lost in a lot of different arguments.
Yeah. Yes, there is. There is kind of a really good anchor we can start with, I think. It kind of comes in two parts and it's really focused on the raw ingredient, not like some of these extended philosophies. So it's got a pretty narrow focus on the raw kind of green coffee. And it's been around for, about 20 years. Bit of change with some of it recently, but essentially one part of it is looking at the green coffee grading. So this is sorting out particular defects in the physical green sample
Just the product at farm.
Yep, exactly. Or kind of at that ready for export stage. Yep. This is based on a 350 gram sample of green coffee. You sort all the defects out and you categorize them according to an international standard. It's the SEA Green Coffee Washed Arabica standard. And it basically allows for 0 primary defects in that, which are major kind of impacts that might happen in the cup, like a full sour bean or like foreign matter, like a rock or a stick or something like that.
Is there more like just what are those like specific things? So it's like sour bean, like if there's just foreign matter.
Yeah, there's full black kind of beans. So they're kind of a different kind of color to it. There's severe insect damage. So from the coffee berry borer, like having like really chomped away at it. Things like fungus, these are all bad stuff that like one of those in the cup or even sometimes within the bag will really either be a health issue for people or it will be significantly inconsistent.
Similar to wine, we see a lot of those ones where it just like ruins an entire batch.
Exactly.
If there's like one in there,
and some of these you open up like a sack of coffee and you will smell that it's in there.
Yeah.
And then it allows for no more than 5 secondary defects or category 2 defects. So these are less impactful kind of defects that'll be in the cup. So it basically sets that, right? 350 grams, that kind of defect count. And the second kind of gauge there is the scoring on the SCA 2004 cupping form that you cup the coffee, you do a sensory analysis using a standardized protocol, and it needs to score 80 points or above on that 100-point scale. So that's kind of the 2 pieces, and generally that's also scored by a calibrated cupper.
Yep. So just for summary, just so we got it. So it's 0 major defects, so those big things we talked about. 5 minor defects maximum. You can only have 5. 80 plus score on the cupping form, and it's calibrated by an amazing sensory, sexy expert. Sorry, I'm just looking at one right now. So that just popped in my
shucks.
Sorry, Freudian slip.
Yeah. Well, I think the point about the calibrated cupper is important because obviously if you use the same tools, someone can put a number on a form and give it above 80 points, but it might not be kind of qualified, I guess, to that same level.
And then I actually like this for the way that my brain works because it's kind of like simple mathematical, like hit these markers and it equals X, and it makes it kind of simple.
Yep.
All the other definitions of specialty coffee are kind of these like evolutions that we've built and like what it means to different parts of it. But I kind of love just like the simplicity of like, it's cleanliness.
I think that's the thing is everyone wants that simplicity, and it is really clear. That's been there. Like when you talk about, is it specialty coffee? It's a pretty navigationable. That's not even a word. It's a pretty easy system to apply and say, yes, it's in or it's out. However, the problem is that I think that when most people are saying specialty coffee, that part of it probably only makes up 10% about what they're referring to when they're kind of going through it. So the idea about like the people, the place, the craft, the barista craft, hospitality, or even the final beverage that's served out in the cup, none of that's in that standard at all. And we will get into this, but just to confuse you a little bit, the SCA, the Specialty Coffee Association, actually changed this definition. Sorry, Rohan.
Also, another reason why we're having this conversation now.
Yeah. So a few years ago, they adopted a new definition for what specialty coffee is from them. And I'll just kind of read it out verbatim here. It's specialty coffee is a coffee or a coffee experience recognized for its distinctive attributes and because of those attributes has significant extra value in the marketplace. Got that?
Yeah, man, it's kind of a bit of a you'll know it when you see it vibe being thrown at us there.
Definitely.
Right. I mean, it seems pretty broad, but I guess we've got like one solid block at the bottom, which is like kind of locked there. And are we still using the 80, like the cupping of the product, or has that been?
We are still using the cupping of the product, but the changes that the SCA
sorry, not the cupping, the grading, like the
green
80.
The green grading's kept.
Yeah.
The grading out of a 100-point scale with 80 and above being the cutoff has changed. There is still a huge amount of people who are using that out there in the coffee trade to kind of, as language and as a framework for this is what specialty coffee is. So I would say it's still the industry standard. And then the SCA has introduced their new coffee value assessment, the CVA, which is still scoring on a 100-point scale, but is much more anchored around this kind of like, how are people
experience
valuing
the value and how you value it. Right.
So,
it makes it trickier. It feels like there's maybe like a building block underneath it, and then the rest is just kind of like poetry.
yeah. There's a whole heap of vibes going on
Yeah.
there. And I think that's the discussion that we need to have, because I mean, we could get deeper into the scoring and the qualifying of it, but I think that vibes area is actually kind of where we're all struggling with a little bit, because it's like, yeah, there's the concrete definitions, but it's also what are we trying to pursue? What's important to us? So I think that's some of the discussion that I want to have.
Sorry to go off track here, but is the idea you think of that reframing to bring more value for different farms in situations because they feel like that maybe the specific cutoff of these defects and that is maybe too much to ask of certain places?
Well, the green coffee defects are still in it. It's more about the sensory assessment and saying what is high value and what's not, right?
Yeah.
What's different. And I think the driving impetus here for the CVA was we wanted to make sure that it wasn't one definition of what was quality attributes. You know, if you send like a crazy anaerobic big fermented coffee to Australia, everyone goes, you know, starts frothing over and going, oh, this is amazing. This is the best. And then you send it to Scandinavia and they're like, meh, rejection at the border, you know, no. But it's same coffee, but different value in different marketplaces. Some would say it's a defect. Some would say it's a high quality specialty.
Yeah.
So they were trying to open up and allow the flexibility for what people are pursuing, which I think kind of speaks into some of what I want to talk about with like what people are utilizing this space to explore in terms of coffee.
So why are we having this conversation now and not, 5 years ago?
Yeah. Good question. I think honestly, it's been a slow accumulation of like a whole heap of different things that are starting to light a fire under the industry, and probably a little bit late in the piece if we're honest. Like that fire's kind of been burning. We've seen signals of it for quite a while. The core piece right now is like coffee prices this year have been completely like unhinged. not just like creeping up, but just out of control.
Okay, but what does that like actually mean on the numbers? Like you said unhinged, but what does unhinged mean technically?
Technically, let's get the definition.
Let's get the technical. Let's define what unhinged means.
Well, look, so coffee is traded generally in reference against the New York Stock Exchange, the CE price, which is kind of all coffee, right? It's commodity coffee. And unfortunately, the specialty market is still very often hinged against that kind of framework. And so that's the price that influences things. It's got speculation and everything else in there. But this year alone, the price crashed almost 40%. And then within the same month, it ripped right back up to like 50% higher again. That is the sharpest like weekly swing since like the early 2000s. And it's not just like that one window. The fluctuation and variability of the pricing has just been all over the place.
Yeah, in a month, that's absolutely insane for anyone that knows the market like that.
I mean,
that's crazy.
Imagine anyone trying to plan their business. Like if you're a producer, in particular, right? You're trying to plan a year-long agricultural production.
You've got plants growing.
What the hell? What the price am I likely to get? Who knows? And, but it influences everyone along the chain, roasters, cafes, importers. Like, how do you know what the price of your product is going to be? How do you know what your business model is going to be, 1 month to the next month? So, it adds some real problems into it.
But I mean, you did mention that happened earlier in the 2000s. I know there's also been other fluctuations. Like, is this actually something new, or is this just one of those moments where we're all kind of getting up in arms because we're like living through it now?
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And I think that's the right question we need to dig into, because this year's chaos of pricing sits on top of like a much longer story there, or kind of trend of things kind of happening. Like margins are getting worse at both ends of the supply chain. Producers are really struggling to kind of, that's a whole deep dive into systemic issues there. But, cost of production is really high and the income is not. And then on the cafe side, we know that so many hospitality businesses are increasingly struggling with margins there. And it's been moving that way for decades. So it's not necessarily like, why are we exactly talking about it now? But it's like, this is the trend that's been building towards like, we need to have more of these conversations.
Yeah. if you look at it from a cafe standpoint, like just the raw numbers of like looking at it, like, you know, back in 2016, the average retail price of a coffee was $3.50 to $4.
Yeah.
Now today we're at $6 to $6.50. So
this is kind of Australian
based.
numbers,
Yeah, these are
Australian
Australian
dollars.
numbers I've got here.
Yep.
The cost of goods sold was, it used to be 70 to 90 cents for a cup of coffee. Now we're looking at $1.55 to $1.80. So up over 100%.
Yeah. Only still a small portion of the price per cup, right? But
Yes.
yeah, still up.
Then we're looking at gross profit margin was 75 to 80%, now 70 to 74. So that's dropped down 5%.
So that's kind of interesting, isn't it? Because it's like the green coffee part of that, which is the gross profit margin, hasn't been compressed too much. But then what are the other factors that it's influencing?
Well, the other thing, I mean, especially in Australia, I can't speak for the rest of the world, but the labor costs and the costs of rent and all those things have just like skyrocketed.
Yeah.
I think in Australia back in 2016, I think the minimum wage was $18 an hour. And now we're nearly up at like $26 an hour with superannuation, with award days on Sundays, with all these things. So the cost of that stuff. So a lot of it is coming into like labor costs of trying to produce that coffee as well.
Exactly. It's just like really pinching in. I mean, if you start looking at some of those numbers, net profit margin is ridiculous for like number of coffees that you have to sell to make.
Oh, milk and packaging. Like you're looking at like cups now, like in packaging and lids and that, like 30 to 50 cents a cup.
Yeah. Yeah. So we've had like increasing production costs and pretty static kind of per cup prices being sold. And on the flip side, at the producer end of the chain, you've had a similar kind of thing. Like cost of production has continued to go up. There's like huge labor shortages out there in terms of getting pickers and farm labor. All of your input costs have skyrocketed, especially in the past couple of years with wars all over the place and getting access to fertilizers and input, plus all of the other expenses. There's land pressure as well. You know, like if it's not profitable, people are just wanting to sell off their farms as real estate development. All of the kids are saying, sorry, mum and dad, I'm going to the city to get a different job, a real job.
Yeah.
Coffee historically has been sold in this really narrow window in terms of the market price, like, you know, $1.30 US per pound back in 2016. And outside of the last 20 months in spike in prices, probably 24 months or so now, that's been really fluctuating in that like $1 to $2 per pound range. It really hasn't moved much in terms of inflation or cost of production. So the margins for producers really getting squeezed down as well. Yeah, I think that those are two of the elements that's like, I think forcing this question to be bubbling up more and more now of like, what are we doing?
I was going to say, mate, it's a pretty clear picture of why we're trying to ask that question. Now, even though there's even more factors coming in. But I guess we just like look back though, like I know I'm taking us on a little bit of a journey here. Just like, where did the term specialty coffee actually come from? Is it kind of this 2000s that we talked about? Is it before that?
Yeah, it actually emerged earlier on than that. It kind of like, I think it was born out of some of the slow food movement and the early kind of like post-industrialized kind of food
after the
production.
wars and the cans and all the canned and microwave meals.
After the convenience of mass production.
So is that like 80s, 90s? 80s?
Yeah, like in the 70s, actually, and around the
70s.
mid-70s. So the term originally of specialty coffee was coined in 1974 by an amazing coffee pioneer, Erna Knudsen. And she wrote about it in an article. And she kind of talked about it as beans with a distinctive flavor from a specific microclimate, right? So we kind of came back to like, it tasted like something from a particular place.
Why have we done all this just to land back at the exact same definition?
I know. Well,
not
that's
exact,
a very
but it's
good
pretty
question.
close. It's pretty close.
But, you know, that wasn't so much part of the movement. That was like, I guess, the coining of the phrase.
Yeah. So that it was coined then. Is that kind of when we globally started calling it specialty coffee?
I mean, that was where it started, but I think that it really took off actually at the crash we talked about, but an earlier crash back in the really early 2000s, so early market crash. So 2000.
Oh, yeah.
2004. So this is about 26 years ago now. But the global coffee price had been stuck under $1 US per pound for like a long time. And at one stretch in 2001, it actually dropped below 50 cents. I
don't think I would have said in any time it would be below 80 cents. Like 50 cents is insane for a pound.
Yeah. And so, I mean, you extrapolate that out in year old Australia, we've got like, 2.2, what is it? Like $1.20 a kilo for green coffee. Like what? Yeah.
That's what we're laughing.
It's like, it's insane. And that number is below the cost of production for pretty much any coffee farmer globally, right? Like it was costing them more to produce than they could potentially sell it for.
Sorry, stupid question. So below cost,
Yeah.
they're losing money running the farm.
Yes.
Right.
If they put any energy, any input.
Wait, how long did that happen for? So they're like most of these farmers are just losing money for a year, hoping that after the crash it gets better is basically the hope.
It's kind of the hope, I guess. Yeah. But there are a bunch of things that kind of triggered that off that all converged on that, right? One is that coffee plants take a while to kind of catch up, right? You plant a coffee tree, it takes a few years, 2 or 3 years before it bears fruit, right? So when there's scarcity, people go in and plant a whole heap of trees, and then in 3 years' time when it's producing fruit, it all lands and there's a glut as prices are softening already, right? So you're kind of playing catch up in outer sync. And secondly, there was a big change. There was the International Coffee Agreement, which was like a global kind of quota system between producing and consuming countries. And that collapsed in the late 80s. And so basically without it, all of these countries went in and started planting a whole heap of coffee in like the 90s, right? They were like, oh, it's free for all. We're going to go in. And all of that started coming on, and the harvest started coming in those early 2000s. And suddenly there was this huge glut of green coffee, and it just pushed like all of the coffee prices down. And the third thing that not many people talk about, but is kind of interesting, by 2001, the 5 biggest coffee corporations in the world controlled something like 70% of the global trade. That's a whole heap of leverage to like squeeze down their supply chains further in. All of those things kind of came together.
Right. So it's not just bad luck that this happened. There's some structural stuff kind of involved as well. But what I kind of want to ask about kind of talks about the birth of like direct trade and fair trade. Yeah. And that was kind of born through this, right? Because of this crash.
Yeah.
Why did it produce those two things?
Yeah, we're looping back to like where did specialty coffee become this movement, right? Yeah. And it was really in those early 2000s, and some of these things that emerged out of it with fair trade and the concept of direct trade, which isn't a formalized thing. More vibes coming on here.
There are other episodes in the backlog that can dive into that further.
We'll get into that one. What basically happened is that the crash really exposed that commodity pricing pays every producer the same number per pound, regardless of the quality, right? So this is back in the day, back in ye old day. You got to think like people weren't being rewarded for quality. It was just, here's a product, here's a global number. I don't care like what you did to it. You're getting paid the global number, right? That was the commodity pricing. And when it crashed, it didn't actually matter like, oh, you're at 83 cents on the market. Didn't matter how much it cost you to produce it, right? A brilliant farmer, mediocre one, they all get paid the same thing. And fair trade came in as an organization to break that link, guaranteed that floor price, and with a set reference of kind of generally what it costs to grow the coffee. So something sustainable and really secured people's kind of livelihoods. That was like fair trade's drive. Because again, we come back to that idea of like coffee as a colonial extractive crop that it wasn't generally aiming to look after like what happened to people's livelihoods.
Sorry to continue to open can of worms, but then
that's this episode.
But then direct trade, different fix for the same problem.
Yeah. It's kind of similar root cause, but like a different mechanism there. So if you're a roaster who actually wants great coffee, this crisis was like a huge alarm, right? You can continue hearing this alarm to blare now. Maybe haven't been paying as much attention to it as we should have, because farmers who are capable of growing like amazing coffee have kind of zero incentive to invest in specialty when like the market is just so low. If they're getting paid the same, like why would you do it? There's so much effort to make specialty coffee. And interestingly, it actually happens the opposite as well. When the market's like really high, like now when we're recording, why would people put in the effort to produce specialty if they're already getting like this? Like if you want them to keep doing more work, it has to be above that. Just because it was higher doesn't mean that the incentive is there. People were like literally ripping coffee trees out and planting other crops because they're like, it costs us too much to grow, walking off. So,
but just quickly interrupting, just curiosity, what are they ripping out the coffee plants and putting in? Like, what's better than coffee?
yeah, that's a good question. I'm not entirely sure what they were doing agriculturally back then, like what the market was supporting. But nowadays you see people kind of pulling out coffee trees and planting with like avocados or macadamia or other like faster, more resilient kind of crops.
Yeah.
And even just like local vegetable supply, subsistence farming stuff where they're going to get really quick cash turnaround.
Yeah.
That's kind of definitely a little bit safer than some crazy global market they're riding. But yeah, if you were a specialty or a quality focused roaster and back in those early days, there was a real commercial reason to kind of step in and try and pay more for the green coffee and the relationship, because it kind of secures your own further future supply. But it did end up pulling that sourcing out of like this commodity kind of blended system where there was no traceability, no differentiation. It was like, me, small quality focused roaster back in the early 2000s, I'm going to identify where my coffee came from and pay that person more. So I've still got great quality coffee to sell. And it kind of created this landscape where there's traceability, there's a particular identification of a relationship, of a farm, and yes, hopefully better pricing. That's kind of also where that kind of direct trade, the roots of it came in. And then it really got developed by people like, Stumptown and Intelligentsia and Counterculture in the US and others.
Were there any other kind of factors that emerged from this time that maybe have a bit of a part of this conversation of what specialty is or how it like kind of evolved?
Yep. I think there are a few things that kind of play into it. I think that back in roughly around 1999, Cup of Excellence kind of launched.
Yep.
Interestingly, they actually launched in Brazil, which, a lot of people in the specialty world just go like, oh, Brazil, that's not as exciting as some fancy things. But it was the first time, again, you've got to like reframe your mind to like, what would it have been like before what we have now, right? Like
in 99.
In 99, it's like no one was talking really single origins. No one was talking about like cup score even. I think it was really just starting to be used.
No one was saying that their coffee tasted like white peach and jasmine.
No. You were just moving outside of this era of like clean, not clean. That was like the commodity system of like tasting it, go, it doesn't taste like absolutely terrible. That's fine. Tick. Like it was a yes, no question. But Cup of Excellence really changed that, definitely impacted part of our landscape. It was the first kind of auction. We had top scoring things, really differentiated, really high quality. We're starting to talk about flavors and characteristics that were much, much more distinct. And that kind of added, I guess, like if you thought about fair trade as this price floor for security, this was kind of exploring those upper reaches of like high value pieces. And then probably iconically in 2002, we had like past guest of ours, legendary roaster Trish Rothgeb. She wrote an article literally called First Wave, Second Wave, Third Wave and coined that third wave coffee kind of framing. And that kind of captured some more of those vibes, I guess, that we're talking about of not just quality in the cup, but some of that quality and craft-led shift. So that happened. And some of the big crew like Starbucks and Nespresso built their own in-house like sustainability programs. So they were kind of saying like, hey, we still know this needs to kind of happen. So I think there's some of the other big things that were going on in that same time.
Yeah. So like even if the big guys were unbundling and rebundling these pieces, taking the sustainability story without necessarily buying into the full specialty package.
Yeah. I think all of this language and the movement, I guess, that we're starting to kind of talk about was emerging with some of these different elements kind of creating a bit of framework and probably actually...
It's like Starbucks. Like, Starbucks is technically specialty coffee, right?
Yeah, pretty. As far as I know, in terms of their green coffee sourcing, if you're looking at the raw product, even if you look beyond the raw product, I think the raw product is generally like defect-free, probably cups 80 and above on that score. And then if you look at like what they're doing in the cafes, they're often offering single origin coffee that's being differentiated by saying, hey, this coffee was grown in this place and tastes different to that place. Like,
but here's an art, but A, does it in Starbucks? And B, like that makes the argument of I love having like, the cup score and the definition of defects and like this is specialty.
Yeah.
But maybe what the roaster does to that coffee should also define what specialty coffee is.
I think this is like the nub, the core of this this conversation, right?
Yeah.
Is like when we say what is the special cup of specialty coffee, it's like you could have incredible raw product that ticks those boxes and passes that muster. But then when you serve it out, you've roasted it to a rather dark shade. And then you put like chocolate and caramel and things on top of it. Like, can you differentiate?
You have a, specialty bean in a place where the barista is a kid that doesn't know what they're doing and, treats the coffee in a certain way.
Yep.
There's so many elements like in every part of the chain.
Yep.
That
you could probably make the argument back in like the 2010s as well of like, the specialty movement doing these chronically underdeveloped light roasted coffees where it's like, it's the polar opposite of the dark roast where you're kind of going, yes, this does taste like grass and chlorogenic acid. It's like, is that are we saying that's a specialty coffee? So it's really interesting. I think just quickly, the other couple of things that were this milestone kind of evolution here is that the SCA, the Specialty Coffee Association of America, was founded in 1982. So this was like, a very early convergence of like roasters and importers who were like quality focused. The European arm, the Specialty Coffee Association Europe, was in 1998. They ended up merging together into the SCA. The Coffee Quality Institute was founded in 1996, so just before the early 2000s. And they're the ones who basically spun out the Q Grader program that started utilizing that cupping form in 2004 that is the 100-point scale. And so before that, there was all of these vibes and moves and some like light definitions, but nothing to actually kind of qualify and quantify this is kind of what specialty coffee is or isn't.
However, now apparently, according to the SCA, we're back to, you taste it and you're like, yum. You'll know. What a way to define it. You'll know.
You'll know when the market knows, when the market values it. It's interesting. I've got some challenges with the CVA for sure. We'll probably park those for a future discussion. I think we've had some of them. But what I do like about the conversation is it comes back to it's talking about a coffee experience that the consumer or that anyone is having. And I think that comes back to what we're all like wrestling with here is like when we say specialty coffee, what is it that we're actually kind of getting into? So there's a little bit of the background for you. Thesis time.
Oh,
I don't know if it's going to be
serious.
that coherent. The point that I'm trying to make, I guess, is that specialty was never one thing. It was a whole bundle of different things and ideas that was tied together under this title. The technical standard we kind of talked about and opened with green coffee and cupping score. Plus there was this kind of emergent direct relationship with origin or with the producer, or at least traceability. I think that's kind of a core piece. There was a bit of a slow craft movement that was happening at the same time with the emergence of barista craft, right? Like of preparing it well, thoughtfully with taste there. There was definitely like an indie kind of countercultural kind of movement, that identity that was in there. And then something about the elevated hospitality of it, right? Is like with specialty coffee, how are we serving that? And it was all kind of bundled together and sold under one phrase.
Yeah, it all kind of came together. But I think the interesting thing here that we keep talking about is that specialty coffee isn't just one thing to one group.
Yeah.
Us as these two people on this podcast can't say like, this is what it is. Let's run this bundle past everyone in the chain. And where does specialty mean something genuinely different to each of them and not just sound different? So like first you start the producer, like,
oof, I feel unqualified to talk about what it means for producers. Well, I think we need to get like their voice directly speaking to this. But I think the promise or the hope is that specialty coffee, I mean, obviously, as I said, it means a whole heap more work. But
what does specialty coffee mean to you? A lot of work.
A crap load of work and annoying requests from roasters. I think that it meant, ultimately that they could pursue a quality premium. Like if you think about this as pre-specialty with commodity, the introduction of specialty was like, if you make better quality-based decisions, you can get a premium on the market and theoretically have better livelihoods, better outcomes. But also there was something about specialty coffee that talks, I think, to producers about market access because of that traceability and kind of connection to market.
Yeah.
Commodity by its kind of nature is almost anonymized.
Yeah.
And, it's all bulked. You don't have traceability. And so it kind of disempowers the producer to kind of make those sales connections, or at least further up the chain, even not the final sale.
Who did we have in? We were like chatting about, you might have the same coffee go to a bunch of roasters and it's just like the big roaster logo on the front. And it's like, why isn't it our logo of like, you know, this is the coffee that's in your bag, you know, it gets like ownership under someone else's umbrella of what it means. Another one, like obviously to producing countries, it means something. I don't think we need to wildly speculate what it would mean to producing countries. I'm sure there's like a level of pride and craft in like what they're doing. But, you know, again, I think it's one that when we get someone on the show, we can let them answer. Importers and roasters.
Yeah, I think specialty coffee to importers in particular was kind of about a clarity of communication, right? So that it was a common language and a goal that we were aiming towards. So they could kind of say, what do you want? What can we find? And there's a clear sourcing pathway. I think for roasters, you know, it was a little bit of a different thing. It was kind of a specialty coffee represented a differentiation early on from the commodity, the mass market kind of like dark roast imported coffees. But it was also I think for a lot of roasters has signified a bit of a movement. Like there's other values that specialty coffee meant, is that they cared about quality. Theoretically, they were inferred they cared about there's ethical considerations of like looking after the supply chain, paying people better, looking after them. Certainly like that they were taste forward, I think, for roasters. And I think that for a lot of roasters, it was like again, that craft kind of movement is that we're kind of making this. We're not like manufacturing this.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny when it gets to like, then when you start looking at like cafe/barista, it starts like encompassing a lot of these things. Like obviously there's the traceability, the link to origin, all those elements. Flavor is obviously going to be a huge one.
Massive.
And then cafes and baristas, I think for me, when I was a barista, it was like a level of hospitality and craft elevating to that next level of I've done more research and work and understanding, and like this is a profession, you know, not just I'm working behind slinging some coffees to make minimum wage. It was like that level of craft behind everything that you did.
Yeah. I think it's also about ultimately, I guess, that beverage experience. Like what are people getting when they come in, that they're kind of having something that's deeper than like a tick box or just something that's convenient. I think, you know, for a lot of baristas, there was definitely that craft. I think for cafes, like if you think about people who call themselves a specialty cafe, what did it mean to them? And often it meant they were putting coffee at the center of the business, and coffee flavor and quality of preparation and kind of the ingredients, I think, were probably the two things that kind of came out there. Because if you compared it to like it was a coffee house or something, I don't know what the term is, but like what is the not specialty cafe? It's like, oh, it's the coffee house that like ticks the box. They've got coffee there, but it's not part of the overall conversation or focus of that place.
Here's a curveball. What about just like the general consumer?
Ooh,
I mean, there's a huge range because there's the consumer can be anyone, like someone that gets specialty coffee, or it could just be a general consumer. Not to be mean, but some of it would have just been like not super dark roasted coffee.
I mean,
well textured milk.
You know, I think, again, one of the things I've been thinking about with as we wrestle like with what is specialty coffee is that I think that a lot of people are still anchored and have their business model around what it meant or what was different about it in the early 2000s. You know, because back in the early 2000s, exactly what you're saying was differentiated.
Yeah.
Right? Like it tasted like something different than ash and burnt rubber and things. Okay, so that's very different. And, you know, in some cases that was because of exactly where it was from. Maybe it was muted because it had kind of some milk coffee on it or whatever else. But yeah, I think for a lot of people, specialty coffee meant something that was more about flavor than about strength. You know, it was more about variation or kind of variability. The whole term, I think, when people talk about special or specialty beverages, it's something that is unique and different.
Yeah.
Right? I think that's the point, is that like they're looking for something different that's, you know, it's inferred quality kind of basis. But I think that consumers attach like a whole heap of that vibe philosophies around it of like, oh, this is more ethical, or this is more sustainable, or This is more slow craft, indie kind of movement. And there was the flavor thing in the cup that was always kind of at the core of it, I think. But then they kind of navigated their way and went, oh, this is what I really connect with about that whole movement.
Yeah. And I think origin was obviously a big one. I think that was like, as soon as you see like a farm name was the way to be like, oh, okay, I know where this came from.
Yeah.
That means it's, top quality.
Yeah, I think that consumers, and if you look at some of the most recent studies out there, what they infer from the term, I think for a long time, the word specialty coffee or that phrase wasn't really in the consumer kind of language, but they would use things like gourmet. If we're talking globally, like it would be gourmet or fancy coffee or kind of like things like this. It's interesting. I think the consumers kind of have a very different thought to it.
It's interesting now though, from a like standpoint of where specialty is and where this definition is. I think there was a lot of things that built it, but now some of those bundled things are getting unbundled.
Yeah.
I mean, the rise of automation, pre-batch, all those elements where it's about convenience, speed, quality sometimes, if you're doing automation, that kind of pulls away from what we would have traditionally like talked about as specialty coffee. It's like the beans in the machine are specialty. It's like there's just not someone doing each step by themselves, which in some cases it probably means there's less quality issues.
Yeah. I think you're exactly right that, if you think about, I don't know, maybe we had 20 tick boxes back in the early 2000s when we said, what is specialty coffee? And it was everything from the sensory stuff to the traceability, to the ethics, to the indie, to the craft. So there's all these different attributes. Then it become really, specialty coffee has become successful. It has succeeded in taking this message to the world, this package of things, of offering. And now, as you said, people are starting to split those up and cherry pick particular parts to target particular segments. And I don't think that's wrong.
No.
I think that's probably pretty natural. I mean, if we looked at trend forecasting and how kind of like mass market adoption of things comes in, it's like people are going to, ride on the coattails and go, you know what, that looks cool. And so, you've got companies like Blank Street, who are doing like specialty product, specialty beverage, but without the craft thing because it's all automated, fast service, things like that. And for some people, that's the value combination they really like, which kind of comes back to that idea of the SCA definition of like, well, that could be specialty coffee. And then you look at all the raging happening online at the moment about articles about pre-batch espresso. And it's like, I have to admit, I have a kind of a historical like little tension there, right? Of like, I also am like somewhat resistant to the idea of pre-batch espresso, but I'm like, why? Is it really that I feel like someone has to like manually do this in order for it to have like the value that I care about? Why aren't we pan roasting coffee anymore? Why do we use volumetrics? Like surely everything should be a lever machine. We need to get some flare lever kind of on, to get that happening. It's like no electrics. Let's get back. It's like, is this like a resistance for a particular reason? Like, does it have inherent value to it? It's pretty interesting. Like there's like all of the indie craft kind of parts of specialty coffee partnering with some of those other brands. We see all those brand collabs and people are like, oh yeah, the quality in the cup, I'm not that hung up on, but I really like this part of the specialty coffee movement and I'm going to pair it with that. Or as you said, we've kind of got like really slow movement places that are like really focusing in on like that craft element like super deeply.
Yeah.
That's
yeah,
kind of cool.
like Longplay was talking about that. It's almost like saying like, there might be, the coffee might vary day to day, but that's kind of the specialty experience that is handmade and like individually crafted each time by someone different.
Yeah, for sure. So I think like if we come back to like the technical foundation here, what we started with, we know that there's a core there about specialty coffee, about having low defects, which is kind of essentially that's about uniformity, but it's also about like a base level idea of quality. And taste. It's difficult because there's all of these things that are like more philosophical versus measurable about like, ethics and craft and like the idea of the third place that's not really a standard at all.
How many can of worms do you want to open? Now we're talking about third places.
And I think that like we're kind of saying, what does specialty coffee mean anymore? Because all of these different pathways and use of or exploration of the bits of specialty coffee, like that unbundled, unpackaged kind of combo, are now going in all these different directions, but all using the same word. I don't know if we're kind of saying like we all need to have the same word, or like what do you want it to mean? Like what is important for you? And yes, the communication piece might be a little difficult if someone over on the left is saying the same word as you, but doing something completely different. But maybe it's more about your practices and your outcomes than it's necessarily about like what the title is.
Yeah. And I think people can be like, people are smart. Like, I mean, sorry. Sometimes they're smart. Generally, it's like go in and see what it is. There can be, to steal the SCA's words, what is the value to you? Where are you getting it from? What are you taking it? Like, you know, if the blank street convenience without the kind of personal thing to it isn't what you want, then don't get it. Go to the place, go to Long Play and get a pour over made. So when someone pays $6 for a cup of specialty coffee, what are they actually paying for when they get that?
We need to stop inferring that one $6 latte purchase is going to tell us exactly what every $6 latte purchase is driven by. They're playing mix and match. Choose your own adventure of the things they value about with that $6 latte. It could be, oh, it's such a cool craft movement. Look at that fancy barista over there making my coffee. It could be, wow, look at this cool interior design. Ooh, delicious flavors in the cup. These people talk about ethics. I kind of like that. Look at that shiny espresso machine. Hey, this place is kind of cool. I like hanging out here. This is my third place. Away from home, away from work. I'm going to do some work on my laptop. You know, it could be so many different things that they are deciding with that. And we need to not kind of just infer that it's one blanket rule.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many elements. I think when we had Hoffman on, he kind of said, it's like, if you're saying I'm paying $7 for the liquid in the cup, yes, that is hard to justify. It needs to be all the other elements that are going into that cup of coffee there.
We've kind of covered a fair bit of territory. There's been a bit of background. Thank you everyone for hanging with us on this one. Hopefully it's been kind of an interesting conversation. As we prefaced up front, I'm sorry, there's no conclusion. But
what's the movie? Is it 27 is the answer to life?
Yeah, exactly.
Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
But I think, you know, one of the last points that I think we need to recognize is that there's no like immutable, like God-given value to coffee, right? Value exists, as we've said, where the market kind of attributes it, where people want it. So it's not like, does specialty coffee have an inherent value? It's only what we as an industry attach to that and find a market that values it. And I think that there is something there for me personally that I go, when I talk about specialty coffee, I want it to mean something and to be achieving something, you know, outside of obviously just delicious coffee. That's like one thing I want it to be achieving. But yeah, it has some ethical and sustainability kind of conversations around it that I think has a real power in the world to kind of do some different things there. But I think that as we navigate this as an industry, you can put more or less kind of direction on that. And you know, the question is like, is the philosophy or the philosophies that were originally there, do they still hold up now that that's all being teased apart? I don't know, Rohan, I mean, this is kind of a personal off the top of the head. If I said, could you list out for you, what does specialty coffee kind of mean?
I mean, the first things that kind of come to my head, which it's not like a deep emotional thing that I'm feeling. It's just like if you were to say, what is specialty coffee? The flavor is the first thing. It's like getting it and having that distinct element where you can know where it's come from, the origin, all those different things. Mm-hmm. That kind of is what it says. And then obviously it comes down to the craft of how it's made in specialty coffee, putting it together.
Yeah.
And then, I think that traceability of it and knowing where it's come from, who's making it, and then I guess ethics, if it's like they're paid correctly.
Ethics.
I'm tying ethics and producer, where it's from, into the same one there.
Yeah.
What about you?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think very similar, is that like taste is like a big thing. So like, I mean, at the foundation that it's like clean and that it's like not it doesn't have like the distracting negative things.
I think it's just like if someone literally handed you 2 cups of coffee and said, is this specialty? That's what you have to go off. You drink it and you go, oh yeah, I'd say that's specialty.
Yep. Well, look, the thing that drives me, I think, with it is I got caught up in it on a sensory thing originally, and that was the exciting part, right? And that's, I think, an important anchor to it, right? It tastes great. It's enjoyable to consume. It's interesting.
Yeah.
It's satisfying. But the fact that it is intrinsically tied to other places in the world and other people, and that their decisions and how it was grown affect what I'm drinking in the cup. I think that's a fascinating human element to it for me.
We're so disconnected from it so often in that sense of like thinking about this coffee that was in a bag in our kitchen is from, a farm.
It's hard. It's hard to visualize, right? Yeah. Especially if you've never been there or kind of understand that context. But I do think that specialty coffee kind of, because of like that, we talked about the breakdown and the emergence of direct trade because of the need to secure supply chain. I think there's like a natural sphere of interaction that specialty coffee has where it is connected through its supply chain, because you're talking about where it's from and the flavor that is different because of that. And I think that has like a responsibility to making sure that is like, you're not screwing people over on that chain, and not just not screwing them over, but actually that it's a positive endeavor for everyone there. And so I think that's like the real power and the struggle for us to link like the story from drinking through to the producing and kind of adding all of that kind of value all the way through. And we've got to kind of lift that up. And I think, there's some challenge there about, well, there's lots of challenges anyway. there's a lot. But I think that's it. And I kind of had this question down earlier that I'm not sure if it's, I don't think it's the right question, but it was like, does the definition of specialty coffee survive contact with 2026, or does it need rewriting?
I think it does. I think it survives. I think it's just the evolutionary and the things just one step outside of it in that subset. I feel like there's specialty coffee and then there's kind of like this umbrella coming out of that of what it can mean. But I think all of those things under the umbrella can still be specialty coffee.
I feel like when specialty coffee first emerged, it was like this, this painting of like one coherent image. And then what we've done over time is have one of those like magic either kaleidoscopes that you're like looking it through, and every time you twist it starts fragmenting and segmenting more.
Yeah.
And now we're still looking at specialty coffee, but there's all of these like little subsections in it that have got their own life and got their own things to explore.
Look at like co-fermented coffees now and that.
Exactly.
It's like, is that specialty coffee? Are we changing it? Is it, so it's like there's so many different.
And those open questions to me also go, do we need to like lock this down? Like, who cares if it is or it isn't? It's an interesting conversation. It's an evolving space. What we've meant, what we value, what it could mean has
and I
like
think it's great as long as we define and clearly articulate those things. Yep. It's when you don't articulate what is happening and mislead and misguide people that it becomes an issue.
Yeah.
But I don't think that all these things can't exist under specialty coffee.
Yep.
Just definitions are important, or labeling, correct communication.
And I think it's talking about like what you as a company or you as an individual, what you value, and then is what you're doing living that out. It's like, well, if you care about the human part of the creation of the coffee is important, then you need traceability. If you care about the place, then maybe co-ferments isn't as important because it's going to taste fairly similar from one country or one region to the next. So it's masking difference of place.
Yeah.
So it's like, just find out what part of the story you really want to focus on. And the cool thing is that there's like all these different angles that you get to explore in specialty coffee. It's like, am I really going to create a business or an offering to the market that's about just flavor, like crazy different things, or the hospitality part of it, or the people, or So I think we need to get some more input though, because I feel like you and I have just been talking about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that leads us on to doing some pretty cool episodes and talking to some interesting people and kind of putting that question on them of like, what is specialty coffee, and hearing those different POVs.
Yeah, it'll be great. It'll be great to get some other voices in and kind of grow our understanding of it as well, I think, because it is so, like we said, it's so complex. It's like, what are these movements and this idea of like, should it be one thing in particular? I don't know if that's like a personal thing, or I think there is probably the one anchor that I'd come back to with like all of this fluffiness and the philosophy and take it anywhere you want, is that the real benefit of agreed upon standards and a framework that was there with like that 100 point scale, 80 plus green coffee, is that it sets like coherent understanding. It sets like an aspirational targets. And I think we forget, certainly like in the world that we're in, and so many of us in the kind of consuming world, is that we're in this little bubble that when you talk about like global coffee kind of production, specialty is still only this really small part of it. And that having that clearly defined like target and framework meant, hey, we can pursue this. Here's the clear, like at least starting roadmap of like get here. And then there's all kinds of crazy exploration, but get here. And now we can actually have a better livelihood, better outcome.
Yeah.
And I think that like specialty versus commodity is like that, to me, I think that needs really clear like threshold or like direction, so that we can say, hey, we're getting you out of this commodity system that, as we talked about originally, the price is just going all over the place. We need to like leave that behind. And we also need to kind of like get out of that historical like below cost of production or too close to cost of production. And that's where I think specialty coffee should be offering like a clear differentiation.
Yeah. Maybe it's like in the future, there needs to be like a list of like, here are the three, like here are the locked things that specialty coffee always is.
Yep.
And here's the some things that it sometimes is.
Here's the optional. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks for going on the journey.
Thank you for the deep dive and all that research and understanding that. It's a great conversation. It's an ever-evolving thing, and I can't wait to kind of keep diving into it further with some more. Liam, did you learn much today?
Lots.
Liam's eyes are slightly glazed over.
It's very deep. It's very deep.
Well, hopefully it was useful.
It is good. Yeah, I love this.
Awesome.
More convos to come.
All right. Well, if you have any thoughts on what specialty coffee is to you, or if
what it's not,
you can always email us at hello@itsjustcoffeepod.com, or hit us on the socials. It's Just Coffee Podcast. Before we got here today, Ben said there's actually one thing I think specialty coffee is that I want to tell you in private, but I think you should share what that was with the rest of our listeners, Ben.
What is it that I was going to say?
All right. See you next time.
Great. Okay. Bye.
Hey.
Cheers.